to start. Copies of the slides are on their way for members of the public. So we're going to start off with the agenda items. So first of all, welcome to this extraordinary meeting of OSM and People Scrutiny. I'm Councillor Tony Dyer. I'm the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, and on my left is Stephen Peacock, the Chief Executive, and we also have Councillor Christine Townsend, who is the chair of People Scrutiny, who are joining us today. I'll allow other councillors to introduce themselves as and when they speak, and the same for officers when they do their presentation. Safety information, we're not expecting any fire alarms or fire tests, so if the alarm does go off, then please make yourself leave the building by the main entrance. When you go through the main doors, turn right at the top of the ramp and make your way towards the west end of the Bristol Cathedral, where you'll be signed off. Okay. Agenda item number 2 is apologies for absence, and I've just realised I've sent Lucy up into the gallery. So apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Tim Y, Councillor Sharon Scott.
I'm here now.
Oh, sorry, Sharon. Lucy, have you got?
Yes.
Can you remember the others?
Councillor Massey, Chair. Can you hear me? Councillor Massey, Chair. And I think Councillor Rippington subbing for Councillor Bradshaw. I think that was everybody.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. Hopefully the microphone will be working by the time we get to public forum. Okay, can I ask if there are any declarations of interest from members? Councillor Bales.
Just that I was Just that I'm a SEND parent and my son's got an EHCP, so this essentially affects us.
Councillor Weston.
I'm also a SEND parent, although my daughter doesn't have an EHCP.
Councillor Scott.
The same.
Councillor Rippington.
The same. My son had an EHCP, but is now over 25.
Stephen.
The same. My son is a SEND.
Councillor Ornsham.
My son had an EHCP, but he no longer has one for the last 3 or 4 years because he's at university now.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any comments for the previous OSM meeting? Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 5 is Chair's business. Chair's business is, just to say, this is the last public scrutiny session, because we're almost at the last public scrutiny session, because Councillor Steve Smith will not forgive me if I fail to mention that there will continue to be scrutiny sessions for health, joint health. But for the rest of us, our next scrutiny session will be after the election, when we actually do that as part of policy committees under the new governance system, assuming those of us who want to be are re-elected. The other chair's business I'll briefly mention is that it is disappointing. I realise that we put this meeting on at relatively late notice, but it's disappointing that we do not have any members of Cabinet attending scrutiny today, so officers will be taking questions and will be fielding them to the best of their ability. I'm now going to move on to agenda item number 6, which is public forum. So we have a number of public questions, and the first 2 questions are from Jen Smith, and I can see Jen, so do you want to ask your question?
My microphone's not working. I think the audio may be okay, Chair, because we're in a small group, so if the resident could just ask a question and see if everybody can hear okay.
Can everybody
hear me okay?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so, I mean, do you want me to read out my first question, or?
If you like, Jen, I can just give you the response from officers.
Well, I mean, if it's just going to be the same, it's pointless, but I do have a supplementary question. So my supplementary question for number 1 was, we've had a centre partnership group under previous directors of education and executive directors of education, and the answer says it's going to be co-produced with parent carers, but the council is unable to manage the fractured relationship. So with those 2 things in mind, how exactly is it going to work if you can't work with the parent carers?
Is there anybody able to respond to Jen's question?
So we have got a response to the original question, which I don't know if you've got. Fine. Okay. So in answer to the following question, I mean, I suppose I just wanted to emphasise how committed we are to be working closely with the Parent Carer Forum, and to continue to do so, as we have done through many years. In our increasing, as you say, we've had a number of approaches, particularly around focusing on the SEND inclusion strategy, which we are building on as we go year on year. And this year we're doing exactly the same, working as we have done on previous discussions through the Parent Carer Forum on the SEND inclusion strategy in particular. And the safety valve proposal, which we'll come on to talk about, builds on those discussions and has done throughout. So we continue to be really committed to working really closely with the Parent Carer Forum and really welcome the accountability within that.
Thank you. I have a supplementary to my question 2. So I asked, my actual question was, please disclose the communication or evidence whether the Department for Education recommended or insisted that Bristol's application to safety vault was an entirely secret process. And the council's maintaining the view that it was a secret process. So are you saying the Department for Education is lying? Because I'm not sure why you've chosen not to publish the evidence proving that the Department for Education is lying. So effectively calling the Department for Education a liar?
The Department for Education made a mistake. They have acknowledged that to us. They gave us clear instructions that the information was strictly under embargo. They then announced or responded to a request that was made to say that it wasn't. They've acknowledged that that was a mistake, and the Mayor is going to be speaking to the relevant officials tomorrow, because clearly this has caused some distress. I can confirm that the Chair of OSMB has seen the correspondence, that basically we followed the advice and the request given to us by DFE. We also know that they said something different when asked, and that was a mistake in their department, which they've acknowledged to us, and which is why the Mayor is speaking to them tomorrow. And I'm sure the Mayor will then want to make further comment.
Thank you, Jen. Next 2 questions are from Sally Kent.
Sally's not here.
Sorry. Question 5 and 6 is Fiona Castle. Is Fiona here?
Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona.
Can you all hear me all right? Safety Valve Cabinet report details on page 3 that it plans to transfer 9.1 million from the school block into the high needs block over the next 5 years. And it's in addition to cutting top-up funding for non-statutory support by 9.6 million over the same period. Given that top-up funding and presumably any available funds in the school block is currently being used to support non-statutory provision, can the Council explain to me how they're going to be able to decrease spending on non-statutory provision when the financial support for non-statutory provision is going to be removed? Decrease spending on statutory provision when spending for non-statutory provision is going to be removed.
Thank you, Sally. Sorry, thank you, Fiona. Do you want to respond?
So we've shared a response to the question, which I don't know if you have in front of you, Fiona.
I shared it 15 minutes ago, but yes,
Sure.
I have got it.
Sure. Shall I read it?
I've read it.
So I guess the sort of the tenet of the debate is about how do we make sure that we use are we decreasing spending on statutory EHCP plans? Our modelling shows that expenditure per EHCP plan is already projected to rise in the 6 years of the Safety Plan 2020, which is baked into the financial underpinnings of the plan. And the current statutory top-up process is, as you know, being replaced by which we've consulted on. We've engaged, as you know, really broadly as part of the Delivering Better Value programme which preceded Safety Valve, is being replaced with a targeted fund to support the schools which will be outcome focused to improve sustainable and inclusive practice in mainstream schools. So what we're looking to is improving outcomes as well as making sure that we improve the way that we use our resources. But at the moment there is an underpinning the plan. There is an increase in the amount of DSG which is going to high needs pupils throughout this plan. There is no attempt to reduce numbers of EHCP plans at all throughout the process of the safety valve.
Do you have a follow-up question for you?
Yeah. My question is not about funding for HCPs. My question is, all the way through this, you've been talking about inclusion and making mainstream more inclusive. In order to make mainstream more inclusive, you have to fund it. You have to fund non-statutory support, and you are not doing that. You are taking it away. So how do those two things marry, is my question. How does it marry with we want more inclusive mainstreams, with we're going to pull the mainstream support we've got back to the bone? How do those two things marry?
And I think the only response that I can give to that is that when we come on to talking about the safety valve deal itself, is that there are, as you can see, elements within the plan which are about investing in mainstream schools, because as we all know, what we need to be doing is making sure that every mainstream school is keeping children with high needs within the mainstream sector as long as we possibly can, supporting them as early as we possibly can, as we will agree. And therefore, the question is, how do we do that in a proper way and through the processes which are set out, through the funding which is set out within the safety valve deal? So we will talk to that when he presents in a second.
Fiona, you have question number 6. Did you say you read the response? Do you want to go straight to a follow-up question?
Yeah, I have read the response. The numbers are very specific in the funding. It's 6.4 million. That's not just roughly, a few million. You are determined that you are going to save 6.4 million over the next 5 years with a SEND inclusion strategy that's not yet been written. I just don't understand how you can have modelled that when the SEND inclusion strategy is supposed to be co-produced with parents. How can you have modelled that financial plan to know that you're going to save 6.4 million?
Yeah, so the Belonging with SEND programme. Sorry, I'm Tommy Jarvis. I'm the programme manager for the DSG programme. So the Belonging with SEND programme was launched in June 2022 and predates the current work that's happening around developing the SEND inclusion strategy. It's very much focused on schools-based inclusion, so we've taken funding from dedicated schools grant previously, as agreed by Schools Forum, and invested that as grants into schools to improve inclusive practice. The idea is, and how we model that, is by factoring in more children and young people over the next 6 years having their needs met in a mainstream provision. And obviously a child in a mainstream provision, the average cost of an education, health and care plan is lower than the cost of a child having their needs met in a specialist provision. That's where the modelling of that has come from.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Fiona. Caroline Lee-Smith, are you here? Bridget Kelly? Tara Waite? Dan Ackroyd, I can see you are here. So question number 11.
Yeah.
Dan, do you want to, have you had a chance to read the response to your question?
Yes, thank you. I have supplementary questions for, a few of them. Question 11, so the answer said that the DfE advised BCC officers in writing that whilst they should inform elected members as part of the democratic process, they should not announce this publicly. There's obviously going to be a great amount of interest in this letter. I've been told before I'm not allowed to ask for documents as a supplementary question, but to save time as part of an FOI request, can I have the date that email was sent and who it was sent from in the DfE, please?
Dan, what I would say is, I think you may have heard the response earlier that the Mayor is going to be making a statement. I have seen the correspondence now with the DfE. What I would say is, once the Mayor has had that conversation with the DfE, come back to me and we'll see if we still need to get something additional published.
Why? Why should I wait? I'm here as a member of the public. I just asked a legitimate question.
Because I
You're
think
saying-
you just said that you wanted to reduce the amount of time spent on an FOI.
Yeah,
I mean, you can still put it in the FOI.
yeah.
That's entirely up to you. What I'm trying to do is reduce the amount of time you have to wait for a response when you may get the response within the next 48 hours or so. Do you have a follow-up question to your question number 12?
No. I do have a supplementary to my question 14.
All right.
So the answer is quite long, but basically, was the contract with Concelia advertised in public, or was it for part of the stepping up deal? Was that procurement done in public, or was it done as part of an existing contract?
Okay, thank you, Dan. Unfortunately, because there's nobody here who was involved in that transfer, we'll have to get back to you with a response.
Yeah.
But thank you. We're now going to move on to public statements. And statement number 1 is from Jen Smith.
I guess I'm speaking very loudly again then. Okay, so the very foundations of the Bristol Safety Valve Agreement have been forged in secrecy and alleged dishonesty by the most senior leaders in Bristol. Since Safety Valve first came to public attention through the Mayor, Cabinet and OSM, this has played out like a piece of political theatre which makes the likes of Ibsen and Ustermeyer look like rank amateurs. As someone who has had to engage in senders legal action against the council 4 times and been spied on by senior officers in Bristol, I tend to believe the DFE's statement that there was no embargo because I have seen how the council works. The basis of the safety valve is about reducing spend, which can only be done by cutbacks. Years of incompetence in Bristol have shown that this council is entirely unable to come up with a functioning send strategy. Bristol has messed up the send reforms from day one, and safety valves makes it 10 times harder. The to-do list on the action plan lists everything the council has been unable to successfully implement since 2014. You've had 10 years of send failure, and now you think you can do more with less money at an earlier point. And I'd also like to point out this democratic process today is as shambolic as ever, and if you think that working with the Parent Carer Forum, the way that you've been doing it over the last 4 years, is a massive mistake, massive, because you just fractured that relationship and then you smashed it to pieces.
Thank you, Jen. Fiona, I believe you have a statement as well.
I do, yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
So I won't read the whole thing, but I would like to say that in the nearly 50 pages of information that I've read in relation to today and tomorrow's meeting, there's only 2 passing references to the Children and Families Act. I realise that these are financial documents, but the Children and Families Act underpins everything you should be doing, and you are not doing it. And the fact that it's just a passing reference about the council being under a legal obligation to fulfil its duty to send children, but you haven't been doing that. You haven't been doing that for the last 6 years that I've been involved in SEND. You are not meeting the children. There are hundreds of children that should have a specialist school place with EHCPs do not have them. There are children that having their EHCP needs assessments unlawfully refused. My child was one of those. There are children that their EHCP plans deadlines are being routinely missed, sometimes waiting a year or more. Now with the introduction of safety valve, the council would like parent carers to believe it can do more with less. They'd like us to believe that what is essentially a debt management plan will bring a whole new era of SEND inclusion with genuine reform and improvement in services. And the document states that it requires a shared culture, shared responsibility, accountability and learning underpinned by trust. And you've done all of this in secret. The relationship was not very good beforehand with parent carers, and you can tell that from Ofsted and the fact that it was the only thing in the Ofsted review, the working statement of action that you couldn't improve on was parent-carer relationships with council. This has absolutely decimated those relationships. And you have irretrievably destroyed any trust that may have been built. You have a financial plan that details key risk factors into entering a safety valve, but doesn't include any reference to the risk of not being able to meet statutory obligations to send children. I also noticed that the whole plan is underpinned by receiving 28.2 million from the high needs provision allocation, capital allocation. And if it doesn't, the plan actually says you don't know whether or not you're going to be able to renegotiate the plan with the government. So the whole thing is, it has a fractured underpinning. Bristol has thus far not been able to lawfully, inclusively or equitably meet the needs of its population, all the while increasing its financial deficits. But now we're expected to believe that with safety valve, budgets will balance and needs will be met. We're about to enter a brave new world of collaboration and improvement, and I don't believe a single word.
Thank you, Fiona. Statement number 3 is from Dr. M. Williams. And then finally, statement number 4, Dan, it's you.
Yeah. So yeah, answers to public forum questions asked at full council on the 12th of March have still not been answered, still not been published. There are 10 questions related to safety valve that should have been answered by now. By failing to answer questions, this administration has stopped members of the public being able to ask informed subsequent questions at this meeting. This council is an absolute disgrace.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, we're going to move now on to the main agenda items today. There are actually 2 separate agenda items, but as they are fundamentally interlinked and related to each other, we are going to treat them as one agenda item. And part of the reason for that is because there are questions that members want to ask which essentially relate to both cabinet papers, both the one that went to the last cabinet meeting and the one going to tomorrow's cabinet meeting. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah to do a presentation. I'm sorry we haven't got the screen working for you.
No, that's fine. I'm going to do a little preamble and then Tommy's going to talk to the presentation. So yes, my name's Hannah Woodhouse. I'm the Director of Children's Services in Bristol as of the 5th of February. So, and should we just do some introductions actually? Let's take Tommy. Do you want to do that?
So, as I said, I'm the Programme Manager for
You want to do it?
I'm the DSG Programme Manager, Tommy Jarvis.
Emma Lloyd, I'm the new Head of Service for Inclusion.
Guy Marshall, I'm the Finance Business Partner for Children and Education.
Thank you. So, and obviously Rena has been leading this work with us as well as on leave today. So we are part of the team who've been working on this project for a period of time, and really here to provide a technical briefing on what the safety valve is, what it isn't, what it does, what it doesn't do, and particularly how we want to work going forward with you recognising the questions around transparency and wanting to work in partnership. And as Councillor Dyer has said, we're going to be treating both items together because they are about the same thing, and we're going to explain a little bit about why we did what we did in March and what we're doing in the paper for tomorrow. So just, you know, as we all know, in common with other local authorities, Bristol City Council has seen a rise in high needs across the city over the last number of years. SEN needs have risen by 18.5% against 2022. We've had a total of 1,185 statutory assessment requests compared to 1,100 compared to the previous year, and it's particularly been in the secondary sector where we've seen 31% of those requested compared to 23% of last year, so that's particularly where the growth has been in the last year. 18.1% increase in the number of EHC plans maintained by Bristol as of January of this year compared to the same period last year, and so we've seen an increase of 2,189 EHC plans in January 2024 compared to January 2018. So we know that needs have been rising, and Bristol is no exception to that. As a result, the deficit, high needs deficit stands as at the 31st of March 2024 is forecast to be 56.1 cumulative in deficit, and this deficit is projected to rise to by 2027-28, assuming all plan mitigations have been delivered. So obviously we're in a very difficult position in common with many other local authorities across the country. There are 38 local authorities at the safety valve at the moment. There are another 50 local authorities across the country who are in delivering better value, which is the programme that sits below safety valve. So over 2/3 of the local authorities across the country are in receipt of financial support one way or another in respect to their high needs deficit. So the Safety Valve Programme is an agreement, as we know, between local authorities and the DfE to develop plans for reform to their high needs system in order to make them effective, to continue to drive improvement and to make them as sustainable as possible. And to be accepted, local authorities must provide evidence that their plans will have supported improved outcomes for children and young people, as well as demonstrate that their DSG, I'm using acronyms, forgive me if I use too many, do call me up, their DSG, Dedicated School Grant Deficit Management Plan, DMP, are robust and can create lasting financial sustainability. This must include a projection to reach an in-year balance as quickly as possible. And so, on the 18th of July 2023, the Council was invited by the DfE to apply, which is in the paper, Appendix A1, to be part of the Safety Valve Programme. Being part of the Safety Valve Programme supersedes the Delivering Better Value Programme, which we were in already. In August, as you've heard from Stephen, the DfE advised that no public announcements should be made relating to the Safety Valve invitation, and as a result, Council officers met in closed session with members of the Financial People Scrutiny Task Group, members of the Audit Committee, in January preceding bringing the Cabinet paper in March, as well as with members of the SEND Inclusion and Partnership Board, as well as with members of the PCF, as well in development of the Safety Valve Plan. As part of the review process, as we developed the process, the Council were updating their DMP, which was already existing, to include work streams which are currently being delivered or co-designed by stakeholders. So they were including elements of the programme which were already in place, which are part of the overall programme and depend massively on the co-production and partnership working with partners. And that includes changes to the high needs block funding, pathways to independence, and the co-designed SEND inclusion strategy. Changes to high need funding, deficit funding, specifically the non-statutory top-up funding, were approved by Cabinet on the 5th of February following a citywide consultation process. So they preceded the Safety Valve application. And this review was linked to the Council's participation in the DBV programme, and Tommy will talk a little bit about the top-up, which we've already referred to, and how it feeds into the Safety Valve plan. But this work was co-produced, it was co-reviewed. We'll continue to, we recognise the difficulties, but we want to continue to work closely with partners. So, because how we use this funding going forward, particularly how we use the targeted element of this funding going forward, is absolutely crucial to how we work with the sector in improving inclusion in mainstream schools, and that's the key to all of this. So, we had meetings with members of the Audit Committee, with members of the subcommittee of the People Scrutiny Committee in January. The Safety Valve application was submitted to the DfE on the 12th of January, following engagement with Cabinet Board. And then the Council were informed on the 28th of February by the DfE that the details of the Safety Valve submission, but not the terms of the agreement, could be made public as a Cabinet paper, which was subsequently published, as we know, under APR 16 on the 4th of March for Cabinet on the 5th of March. On the 5th of March, the Council presented a report outlining 7 recommendations, which included granting delegated authority to sign the agreement to the Chief Executive on the condition that the terms of an agreement were aligned with the Council's submission. And the Cabinet was also asked to note in that paper in March that we would be making an application for additional high needs provisional capital, which you've already mentioned, allocation funding, and that is what is being asked of in the Cabinet paper tomorrow, is permission to receive high needs capital allocation funding, which is, as we've already said, is absolutely central to the success of the Safety Valve deal. We haven't yet had an update on the high needs capital allocation funding, but as we get it, we will be asking preemptively to be able to receive it in the Cabinet paper tomorrow. Then lastly, on the 7th of March, the DfE presented to the Council an agreement which was to be signed and returned within 3 working days, and on the 21st of March, the DfE announced the agreement on its website. So that's the sort of trajectory that led up to where we ended up with the safety valve approach asked in March and then repeated again in April, particularly on the capital element. I'm going to hand now to Tommy, who's going to talk through the safety valve as a plan and to the slides, which I think you've got a copy of.
Yep, so I'm actually going to start on slide 3 because I think, Hannah, you probably crossed off quite a bit of stuff on.
Hannah, could you just turn your microphone?
So slide 3 sets out our financial forecasting based on what we're calling our mitigated position. So that's if we do everything in our plan effectively and our unmitigated position. And this takes us up to 2029.
Bear with me a moment, Tommy. Has everybody in the gallery got copies of the slides?
No.
Sorry,
do you want? I'm not looking for it, so do you want? I will. I don't need one.
Okay, has everybody got a copy now? Okay, Tommy, please continue.
Thank you. So a significant amount of work went into refreshing this, and I think over the last few months we've seen different iterations of this as we've got to this more refined point. So when, as part of the DBB process, there was a forecasting around the deficit management plan that put us in a difficult financial position, unmitigated, but nowhere near the numbers that are outlined here. And in November, we took a refreshed version of our deficit management plan and the forecasted unmitigated position to audit committee. And between November and January, when we submitted, that number changed dramatically. And the reason that changed dramatically was very much around the uncontainable inflation. So again, having spoken to other local authorities, you can see in the grey boxes, the second one down, you have the uncontainable inflation. And you can see that whenever we spend over our allocated funding from the Department for Education, if we spend 20 million over our allocated funding, we don't receive the inflationary costs on that for the following year, so we have to meet that, say, 3% inflation on that 20 million. And that compounds year on year, so as you can see over the course of those 6 years, we see around £75 million worth of uncontainable inflation baked into our deficit management plan if we were to continue spending above and beyond what our allocated funding envelope is. That was something we learned from other local authorities, that local authorities who have not done so well on their safety valve agreements as they hadn't factored in uncontainable inflation into their plans. So that pushed our numbers up significantly. We also hadn't factored in previously the number of children and young people who are awaiting a specialist place, who have an education, health and care plan, and are in a mainstream provision and have a specialist place named on their education, health and care plan. If we were to place those children in an independent non-maintained setting, because currently there aren't enough specialist places for those children and young people, the costs of one of those those independent non-maintained settings is around £85,000 per year, which is significantly higher. So if we were to factor that in, that pushed our costs significantly higher, and that allowed us to, every time we brought a specialist place online, and one of those children took up a place in a specialist place, that would reduce the projected cost in terms of that unmitigated position. So that's why our numbers pushed up significantly in that period of time. As Hannah mentioned, to be part of the safety valve agreement, we needed to reach a break-even position on our mitigated position within 5 years. So as you can see in 2028, 29, that's where we reach a break-even point. Somewhere between that year we will start to see our costs come into line with the financial envelope we receive from the Department for Education. So that allowed us to have a conversation with the DFE about trying to find an agreement where we could ourselves put in a significant amount of funding into this, and as you can see, we as a local authority have found just over £46 million over the next 6 years as our contribution from reserves and the general fund to meet the needs of not only programme delivery but also servicing the additional spend above our financial envelope over the coming years until we make that break-even point. At which point the DFE have agreed to put in just under £54 million, and that will bring our entire package around safety valve agreement to around £100 million. In addition to that, Schools Forum, it's been agreed that for next year, and we will need to seek Schools Forum approval year on year for this, but we will remain at 0.5% for Schools Forum contribution. So over the 5 years of this agreement, that will total just over £9 million from a schools perspective, and that's in line with what the Schools Forum have agreed year on year for transformation work over the last 2 to 3 years. So we are asking above that. I don't know, it's probably best if we have questions at the end, probably.
Yeah, I think if we get through the slides, because there are going to be a lot of questions.
Yep. So in terms of, that's the financial position, and we found, as I say, from that mitigated position, a position where we were able to have a conversation with the DFE and reach an agreement. And we have that now. The next part is working out, well, not working out, is about delivering the safety valve agreement. And we've set out 4 strategic approaches that we're going to focus on as a system. So the first of these is supporting more children and young people with specialist need in mainstream provision for longer. So that's about supporting and strengthening practice and culture within mainstream provision, but also improving the physical spaces where those children are educated, making sure those mainstream schools are as accessible as possible. We want to ensure that we have the right mix and level of provision to meet the needs of all children and young people when they require a specialist place. So that's about building spaces over the coming years that meets the needs of those children and young people where they require a specialist place. We worked out pretty quickly from our financial modelling that we couldn't just build our way out of this, and we talked about that in audit committee, that we couldn't just build an additional 500-600 additional spaces, because that would again not meet the needs of children in mainstream provision for longer, and that's where we need to be focusing our efforts. We need to design more efficient and effective systems, so thinking about our education, health and care plan processes, how we make that more efficient and effective so that we can meet the statutory timescales for delivering those education, health and care plans, and how we use data to help us model demand in future years as well. So we need to become more efficient and effective in doing that. And obviously we've talked about this already, but how we build and strengthen and sustain the relationships with parents and carers and key stakeholders across the system. That's a critical part of this piece of work too. So on slide 5 you can see that we've broken those four strategic approaches down into 4 areas of around sufficiency, around demand, efficiency and partnerships. And it's those 4 themes that underpin our programme activity. So much of this programme activity has come from our deficit management plan that was agreed at Schools Forum in September 2022. There have been some additions to this that have been developed with key stakeholders, and some that have been approved in the intervening months. So for example, the Bristol SEND Free School, so that was approved last year by the Department for Education. We factored that into our analysis around new specialist places coming online over the coming years and what that means for placing more children in specialist provision. As you can see, we've got the targeted funding and outreach implementation, so we've done the work now to review the existing funding model around high needs block funding and non-statutory element of that. And much of the work now will be about co-designing and co-producing what that looks like, what the targeted funding will be used to support, and how we can shift the support away from that point where it's a crisis point for a child or a young person in their education setting to more early intervention, early identification and prevention work. And on slide 7 you can see there's a work plan over the coming months, which is the areas we're going to focus on. So that's around the co-designing that outreach service and the targeted support, reviewing the Bristol Universal Descriptors and the SEND banding. That's in terms of the statutory funding elements of it, reviewing the SEND governance to bring it into line with best practice nationally, and to co-design that inclusion strategy. And we're aiming to launch a number of these pieces of work at our SEND summit in early July.
Okay, thank you, Tommy. Hannah, do you have anything to finish off with?
I think it was only just to say thanks, Tommy. I think it's only just to say that, I think we recognise the debate about the process through which this has gone, and I'm sure there's lots of learning to be had. I think that this is a chance, I think, to work together to serve this most vulnerable group of children and young people, particularly with the funding from both the department and from Bristol City Council, to be able to set out strategies building on the work that we've done in the past, and recognising that we've got a way to go in terms of how we work together. And I think what we're trying to say is that we do want to work really closely with partners in developing this work, and we're really looking forward to doing that in the best way that we possibly can, and that's why we're here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it now over to councillors. I've got a few hands up. I also had a few hands up even when I came in the first place. So if you can put your hands up again. Okay, if I forget to call your name out, blame me for not being quick enough. So Councillor Townsend, I believe you were first. Okay, Councillor Gollop.
Thank you, Tony. The first thing is that whatever the reasons behind the timing, it's not satisfactory as far as members are concerned. I accept the officer explanation, but it doesn't alter the fact that I'm not happy with where we are. I'm not happy with this part of the process. I could come up with enough questions to keep us going for half a day, and I suspect that's half the time Christine might need to ask the question she needs to ask. We can't do it justice in this time. But there are so many things that are confusing or unclear. So the first one I want to put categorically on the record. Page 9 of the April Cabinet report states Finance Task Group was consulted on the 23rd of November and 5th of January. On both occasions we had a detailed briefing. First briefing didn't mention the safety valve. The second meeting, we weren't allowed to report back what we discussed because we were told it was totally confidential. We were told what was happening insofar as we were allowed to know. We were not consulted. And I resent a cabinet paper saying that we were consulted and giving credibility to a proposal. Now, it may well be that the authority has no option but to go down this route because it's the least worst option available. But to simply imply that there was a full-blown consultation take place is mischievous at best, and I won't go into what else it might be because it's totally inappropriate. Now, the records of that discussion, as I say, don't really record all the detail because we weren't allowed to. And I would defer to Christine and the People Scrutiny Commission in terms of the service impact, although we've had a pretty clear indication from parents of what their concerns are. But there is a financial aspect to this that we also have to be aware of. Resources Scrutiny Commission has flagged up for 2, 3 or 4 years massive concern about the spiralling deficit. And simply because there was a statutory override that meant we didn't have to balance the budget, we weren't balancing the budget. And that was getting to a stage where that deficit potentially could wipe out the whole of the authority's reserves and more. But what I would like to know, and I'm disappointed there's no cabinet member present and there's no one from the central finance team present, I would have liked to know what the contingent liability note in the authority's 2024 financial accounts is going to show. Because my reading is that there is a contingent liability of at least 53 million, which may not be paid by the department if we don't achieve, and significant other costs as well. And when we were briefed on this, one of the questions that we asked was what the risks were, how they were measured, how they were quantified. Well, we weren't even given the detail on the various projects, let alone the ability to quantify the risks. So I see this as a massive potential problem. The only thing that reassured me, I will be quite open, the only thing that reassured me was our former Section 151 officer's advice that she believed the financial figures were a valid reflection, but she also acknowledged there were significant risks. Now, apart from the material contingency, I think there are a number of other issues that I just find raise questions in my mind. The report about Claremont School, and yet the report's talking about inclusion. Claremont School is being expanded so that special needs pupils can be taken out of Redland Green School to allow more non-special needs pupils in that school. So it's not inclusive. They're being withdrawn from the mainstream school and put into a special school. We're using this funding that we're hoping to get to rebuild a school that is falling down. But it actually isn't giving, it's giving 21 new pupils. 21 out of the 380 that are being forecast in the report. But 21 at a cost of £19 million. That seems to me to be a massive gap, and we're not achieving what we say we're going to do. I can go back in history and look at why St Christopher's Special School had to close, because the council many years ago withdrew support for that school. It's now been identified as an asset of community value. That might be a solution to this problem, but it is a massive example of how the authority has been getting things wrong over so many years. And what I would say, Tony, is that's why members are sceptical as to whether we're getting it right now, because there's example after example after example of wrong decisions, and we've heard from parents of the traumas that they've been through, and we've seen it and we've read about it and we've heard about it. How can we be convinced that this is now right and is going in the right direction? How are we going to be monitoring those risks if nothing in any of the reports we're presented actually quantifies what the specific risks are and how we're going to overcome them? So I'm reluctantly accepting we've probably got to endorse this, but my goodness, the potential for it going wrong could result effectively in bankruptcy for the authority. And I don't see enough evidence that we are highlighting this, perhaps because it's confidential, we're not allowed to. But it seems to me it's in the public interest, and it's certainly in members' interest, that we know what those risks are. Sorry I've gone on, but I think you can get it. I feel almost as strongly as Christine does on this issue, and I fear we're not getting it right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Anna, do you want to respond?
So, I mean, I think just on the sort of final point there, it's I don't think anybody would disagree with you that this is a really, really significant challenge. It was a significant challenge before the safety valve came along. It's a significant challenge in delivering the safety valve, for sure. And what we have got set out in the plan, but you've heard from Tommy that what we don't want to do is write a plan that either doesn't, mean anything or isn't, developed in partnership with others. But what is set out in the plan is based on the best evidence that we have about what works best in reducing high needs deficits whilst improving children's needs and outcomes across the country. And that's what we've been doing, working closely with the Department of Education and the team that have been advising local authorities who have been successful in reducing their high needs deficit and improving outcomes for children and young people at the same time. What is it that they've been doing and what is it therefore that we need to be doing? So we're building it on the basis of the evidence that we have nationally about what works best, and that's what you can see in the strands in front of you. We obviously need to do that in the context that works best in the city here and in the context that we've got. But it is, I suppose, just to reassure your point, is how do we know that this is the best, this is what's going to work? It's built on the evidence that we have in front of us. It will be part of an ongoing process of monitoring, both from the department, obviously, but also obviously as part of the council itself and to members. And I've committed to Councillor Dye for us to share regularly the KPIs and the measures underneath the plan that we will be reporting against as transparently as we're able to do so. So I can't say to you it's going to be okay, but I can say to you I recognise the scale of the challenge. It's built on the basis of evidence that we've got, and we will continue to report on progress against it as transparently as we can. And we recognise that that there's clearly been issues in terms of how we work as a partnership, which I'm sure we can all reflect on. I think just on Claremont School, I can't answer you specifically on the examples that you give, but I'm really happy for us to come back to you on specifically what is it we're spending, how many places we're creating. As Tommy said, we do need immediately to be able to, as was pointed out to me recently at the Parent Care Forum itself, is we do need to be able to increase in the short term specialist places in Bristol, but in the long term what we want to do is to be able to meet needs earlier in order to be able to make sure the children don't have to go where they don't need to go to specialist provision, that they don't have to do so. We need to support the mainstreams to do that. So I think that's, unless there's anything Tommy wanted to add.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that the Dedicated Schools Grant obviously predated, or Dedicated Schools Grant programme predated the safety valve negotiations, the safety valve agreement. What's set out there in terms of programme activity would continue whether we were on the safety valve agreement or not. So we understand that there needs to be significant changes within Bristol around how we manage our high needs funding and how we support children, young people and families. So the DSG programme would have continued whether we were on the safety valve agreement or not. Safety valve agreement, as part of that negotiation, was demonstrating to the DFE that they had confidence that we were able to deliver what was set out, and that was based on evidence of best practice nationally around what works in successful SEND systems. So we were able to demonstrate and give confidence to the DFE that we were able to deliver that programme and that it would give us the required financial position in the future that we could enter into that negotiation and into that agreement.
Okay, Jeff, do you want to come back quickly? Can we also try and keep our questions and statements brief as possible, because I know
shorter than mine, yes, okay, point taken. Yeah, I'll try and be brief. Look, I don't want to be unreasonable in this, and I recognise that you've got an impossible job here. But what we've got used to having in terms of how risks have been explained to resources and others is a flexing, a working that works out what the range might be and what the probability in of something happening, so that one can quantify a financial value on that risk. What we've seen here is something where, even to work out where break-even comes on that slide, one has to look for a large deficit figure reducing to see where it's actually coming in. We don't see clarity of the information, and to see that figure falling by £3 million suggests to me there's not a lot of scope for much change and pressure that's going to impact on that figure, and we all know that things don't always go our way and there will be pressures. So I would have expected us to see on each of the areas of contribution to this project, to see what the upside and downside might be, what the risk might be, so that actually we have something to measure, because we shouldn't be saying to officers, you failed by £3 million, you're rubbish. Actually, if you come in within £3 million in 6 years, you will have done a phenomenal job. So I just think we are lacking the information that we ought to have, and if it's not there, the cabinet member has been lacking the information that they should have had and been asking questions on before they decided to support this. That's my concern. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm just going to let Stephen come in on comment.
So I have a lot of sympathy for the underlying questions you're asking about how confident can we be in the plan. It's a snapshot, a moment in time. You heard from Tommy, it was moving around a lot over those 2 or 3 months when we're in this very intense period of discussion with DFE. I wasn't directly involved. My involvement was to speak to the person at DFE who's responsible for all the safety valves and say, how are we doing? And he said, you're like the rest, you're doing it well, you've got some good finance people working with the services, but you need to keep going at it. And what we know is the plan will change, it will evolve. The question you've asked about the accounts, I mean, we know, don't we? Our auditors have said last year and they'll say it this year, it's one of the biggest issues. If you get this wrong, we'll be effectively bankrupt. But so will 50 other places. So we have to go at this. As Hannah has said, you know, we've got to move away from looking to, as it were, thread the eye of a needle to get into a process that is inevitably financially driven, towards looking at this much more through the lens of a true transformation programme, looking at building the relationships, rebuilding where we need to, putting in place the sensible things. I think we all, those of us who are parents or those of us who are service users, will know is the right thing to do for young people. But to your point, Councillor, underpinned by absolutely rock-solid governance and assurance, which involves scrutiny, which involves revisiting all the plans, being much more granular about, you know, what's the work stream, what's it delivering, what's the downside, what's the upside. We've got to put that in place. Some of it's there, but I think what we're saying is, you know, this is a start. This is not the end of the process, and we will be working under the committee system with a whole new set of councillors, we're certain of that. And we'll need to work with them because, let's not forget, this is a political decision. We're officers, so you as members will be in charge of this. You or the people who come after you or the people in your parties. We do work for you. And we're doing our very best to get this right. We're undoubtedly getting it wrong in the sense that this plan will not survive contact, you know, with reality. It will need updating. Some bits will be too pessimistic, some will be too optimistic. One thing we know is no plan survives contact with reality. Let's keep that in our minds. The real question is, would we turn this down? And if so, what would we do to balance the budget?
Okay, I'm conscious we've got an hour or so left, and I've got 9 people waiting to ask questions. Possibly 10 now that Brenda's arrived. Brenda was stuck in another meeting, so thank you for joining us. Andrew, you were next on my list.
Thank you, Chair. I do have questions, but I'm going to start with a statement and then see if anyone else picks up the questions that I had. Because I think I speak for a number of us to say that I probably feel a little bit battered and bruised about the way this process has been handled. As Chair of Audit, and some of these points will echo what Councillor Gollum has already said, but apologies for that. But yeah, as you know, we're listed as Chair of Audit Committee, it's listed as a consultee on this document, and we weren't briefed, but it couldn't be described as a consultation. It couldn't be described as for any sort of formal scrutiny, and I think I want to make that abundantly clear. I think the issue with secrecy, you know, we took on absolute trust that the briefings were complete confidence, and I and other members treated it as such, and we get to the end of the process and there becomes a question over the level of that instruction that we were told came from the DFE to keep the negotiations confidential. Now, I appreciate what the Chief Executive has said tonight with regards to that, but we are left now in a situation in this meeting where we're still not actually clear exactly the level to which the Council was under a embargo, because we are now awaiting a statement from the Mayor to clarify the situation further. So, it feels as a member who kept that confidence that the challenge is, my integrity. I've been questioned as to why I kept that confidence, or why I didn't question that instruction when we took it on absolute trust. And I'm now in a position where can't be confident that was the instruction that came from the DFE, and I'll put no stronger than that. So that's the first thing. The consultation, or the list of consultees, and as I say, I don't believe it was a consultation as such, is glaring in its absence of people scrutiny. Now, the chair of people scrutiny was at that initial audit briefing, but as we've heard, the figures given at that audit briefing evolved quite significantly between that point and the point of the eventual application. So it's it was a preliminary briefing to some extent, and so it's and a number of us, I think, took part in that secrecy again, on the understanding there would be a chance of scrutiny at the end of the process, and that did not materialise prior to the decision being made. And I would feel that timelines could have been looked at, potentially held an extraordinary cabinet meeting that would have a bit later to have facilitated a scrutiny meeting prior to that decision, knowing that the application would become public at the beginning of March. So I think that's regrettable again, that the way it's been handled is just really disappointing. And the final point I'm going to make is there was items in there, and I have to be very careful what I say, but I was surprised that there wasn't more on tonight's agenda in terms of the individual itemised things that are being proposed for the service, whether in a public session or an exempt session. The papers that we have do not, I feel, cover the range of the implications for the service in the detail that I think we would have expected.
I don't know if you want to respond to...
I mean, I think the only thing, so thank you very, very much. I think the only thing we could say is it would be, more than happy to be able to provide the further content on the implications for the service as the next step. What we're looking at here is the cabinet paper which is setting out the agreement in detail, which we weren't able to produce in March for reasons that we all understand, and also asking about the capital high needs allocation. So that's the papers that were in front of you. I think it would be perfectly reasonable for us to set out in more detail implications for the service as part of the next step, and indeed obviously that's something that we would really welcome the discussion about, so we're very happy to do that.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. I'm trying to remember what my list of. I've got Councillor Smith, Councillor Bowes, Councillor Weston, Councillor Fodor, Councillor Rippington, Councillor Scott, what do you say? Councillor Stone, Councillor Townsend, and Councillor Wilcox, and presumably, I can't see you, Sarah, but did you have your hand up as well? Okay, so it's pretty much everybody. So going by the list on my piece of paper. I'm going to go with Councillor Steve Smith first.
Thank you very much. I'll try and be very quick. I just want to say I think it's a real shame no one from the Cabinet is here. I'd like to understand what information they had that we don't have when they signed this off. If it was just this one-page summary on which which is all that was published in March, if they signed up a £100 million deal based on that, the politicians weren't in charge. They couldn't possibly have been. What I think this is telling you, though, is that in order to get to a 10-ish, £11 million surplus in the final year, and therefore to wipe out the cumulative deficit, you need to deliver £72-ish million worth of savings. And that includes, this is all in the last year, roughly 12 million of which is described as a stretch optimistic target. In other words, if you don't deliver pretty much all of that stretch optimistic chunk of saving, you don't achieve a surplus and you don't wipe out the deficit. Others have talked about the lack of a risk assessment here, but I'm sure one does exist in the background somewhere. Can you just tell me what is your level of confidence in being able to deliver all of that stretch optimistic target, given that we know other savings programmes in the council have delivered something like 85% of their proposed savings? I think that's about right. Is this realistic? And more importantly, what is the consequence if we don't? Does that put the 54 million from the DFE at risk if we don't hit the savings we need to hit?
And last items.
So the mitigations in the plan each have their own risk assessment built into them. As you quite rightly guessed, that plan represents probably a mid-case between bad and good. So we have built some elements of risk assessment into each of the savings lines that are in there already, and try to evaluate that as we go along. However, as you say, it's quite hard to predict at this stage exactly how those will turn out. I think you're asking me effectively to express a level of confidence about the plan. We worked on that with our previous section 151 in quite some depth over the winter. We are reasonably confident that that plan is achievable as it stands, and we have a margin of error built into some of the savings in there. So there is some scope for things to go wrong, and us to be able to correct them. And as Stephen pointed out, the plan is always going to be evolving and changing. We're going to, as we learn new things, we're going to move it on, we're going to discover new ways of changing the financials within there. I think the plan in 2-3 years' time won't look like the one you see before you now, but it will be achieving savings, and we will be getting there. In terms of the question about DFE, and the payments, we've already received the first tranche payment, which is about 21.5 million from memory. Subsequent payments are based on achieving the targets as it lays out in the agreement. And again, we have a process we go through with DFE that if targets are missed in one quarter, there is an arrangement whereby we rework the plan again and we find new ways of achieving the targets. It's not a once and done process. I think there is some flexibility in the way the plan gets delivered. Ultimately, if we end up off track over many quarters, DFE will ask us to rework the thing from scratch again. It's not a feasible outcome that they will let us just suffer a solvency crisis as a local authority. So for their own purposes as well as ours, we need to get a plan that works for both of us. And that, I think, is the outcome we'll achieve.
Okay, Councillor Bells.
Stephen, you said that officers work for us, and I hope that is true, but and you also said that it was a political decision, so you were told by politicians to make this decision and carry it forward. But I think enough of us have said that none of the politicians that made that decision are sat here right now. So it is very worrying. As I said, I'm a SEND parent. I know some of the SEND parents sat up there. In 6 years' time, some of us might not be sat here. That's 2 elections' time. So it feels very much like the onus is on us, but we didn't make that decision. So it is very worrying, and as I said, I share a lot of the worry, but you know, under a committee system, as you said, it's going to be very, very different, and we will make decisions, but we've all been briefed here, and we've all heard what the officers have had to say, but after the election, this election that's coming up, we don't know who's going to be sat here, and in 6 years' time, that's going to happen again, so they're not, you know, that's a long time, that's a long way ahead. You know, under a committee system, you know, the decisions that were made before us, you know, if it all goes wrong, it's down to us. You know, we're going to be blamed for that, and that's not really fair. So I think, you know, you have given a lot of reassurance, but what happens if it does fail? And I think a lot of people are worried about bankruptcy, but you know, we didn't, none of us made that decision.
Thanks, Kerry. Stephen, do you want to respond?
Just to empathise, it's a really tricky place to find ourselves, and you know, 1 in 4 councillors believe their local authorities are at risk of technical bankruptcy. It's not an accident. It's happened across the sector, and it's not just SEN. So, just to qualify what I said and how you responded, Kerry. I mean, obviously, we've advised the politicians that we think, on balance, this is a plan they should get behind. Our recently departed Section 151 officer, who you all know, who's a very prudent and thorough person, went through this plan, and as Guy has mentioned, has said, on balance, this plan looks like it's achievable, it's stretching. And we always have to ask ourselves, if not this, then what? And of course, a new administration will want to and should come in and you know, lift the drains on this. I would want and expect a committee to do that. We all want that, we welcome that, because we need to know that you have, you know, understood the trade-offs and the compromises. But I keep coming back to the question, and you're right, you know, we'll be blamed. We're all public servants, right? We've got to do what we can with what we're given. This is our best effort. It's one that the administration has decided is good enough to give us permission to enter into a contract with the DfE in common with tens of other authorities. Is it perfect? No. Will it look the way it does now in 3 years' time? No. But it is something we have recommended this administration to do, and I suspect, I know, in May, we'll be suggesting the same to whoever is in the relevant committees on the basis of the evidence and the alternatives. These are not easy choices.
Thank you. Mark, before I go to you, I'm actually going to go to Councillor Scott, because I just realised I put SS down once when there's 2 of you. Well, my apologies. Councillor Weston.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of quick questions to clarify in my head exactly where this sits, and then I'd like probably a more substantive. Are we doing any additional mitigations, savings proposals for the safety valve that we wouldn't ordinarily be doing anyway? So, obviously, the council has savings targets as part of its estate. So, when we're planning ahead for our budget proposals, we plan those savings targets in. Is there any additional thing we are doing that we wouldn't ordinarily be doing?
So outlined on slide 6 is a breakdown of all the projects that we put in there. Most of these have been committed to, and we will be delivering. The only one that there is a question mark over is the capital investment in new specialist settings, which is the second box, and that's reliant on the high needs capital allocation from the Department for Education, which we were allowed to apply for additional funding alongside our safety valve submission. So
actually the vast majority of the mitigations we would already be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand.
We need the places to get them mitigate, otherwise.
Yeah.
If we don't get the capital, we don't get the places. It's the places that are going to.
Yeah. No, I understand. What I'm trying to get to in my own head on this is, if we are going to be doing every single bit of the activity that's outlined as the mitigation anyway, then this seems like the DfE is sort of saying, well, here's some additional money to try and solve the deficit at the same time, if you know what I mean. That's what I'm trying.
I agree with you, but if
Christine, sorry.
If we don't get the places,
Yeah.
this is
It's actually helpful,
this is,
Chair. It's okay.
this is icing on cake stuff. It's
Yeah,
the
okay.
places that we
Both Christine, if you're going to respond, can you put your microphone on so...
That actually was helpful, sorry, apologies. Right, my general comment here is I absolutely hate how we got here because I don't think there has been consultation, and hell hath no fury like an SEND parent ignored, and I think an awful lot of the SEND parents do feel ignored, and for us sitting here as councillors, all too often this can be a financial thing that we're looking at balancing the books. That's one of the big things, especially in this season. However, I don't think we can or should ever lose track of what the impact will be for kids and for parents that are struggling through a system that all too often feels like it's configured against them. The most helpful slide for me actually wasn't in our pack today, it's in the Cabinet report tomorrow. So there's actually a slide there which talks about the deficit management plan, and particularly the page 2, which talks about mitigations and savings. I think what I would urgently urge officers, and I'd urgently urge a Cabinet member to do, is expand on each one of those and explain what that does, what that means for parents, how that translates down. For those that can't see it, it actually is a list of all the various mitigations and reduced savings. So, you know, if we're talking about the new capital request, well, what does that mean for the kids? How is that going to improve things for them? You know, if it's a case of actually, for example, on the new places, it means we don't have to send children in taxis up to Cheltenham to access school places because they're going to be able to access in Bristol. That's a benefit, both to the child and to our financial bottom line. So we should be talking about that. That, I think, should be very clearly spelt out, which probably brings us back to the comments made earlier. The consultation with parents has to happen so they understand this. Because it seems like an awful lot of concern has been possibly raised because we failed in that. I do have one specific question, if I can, and then I'm going to shut up, Chair. You'd be delighted to know. The Bristol Special Free School is talked about a lot. Where exactly is that? Because I've heard a couple of sites mentioned at various points. Are you able to say?
So it's planned for Southmead.
It is where I thought.
Yeah.
Right, then I'll shut up. My advice is expand on that list. Explain how it's going to impact.
And I should have pointed out that Lucy has taken notes for a refer to Cabinet tomorrow, so I think we will include that as a recommendation from OSMB and People scrutiny to the Cabinet member. Okay, I'm going to move on to Councillor Fodor next, and then after Martin it'll be Tim and then Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, a lot has been mentioned about risk, and most of it has been related to finance. The Cabinet report tomorrow, paragraph 17, is all about financial issues and questions and, you know, possibilities and doubts that might be built into that. I think there are three quite separate types of risk. They all interact. And one is the financial risk. And there seems to be an awful lot of uncertainties. We've been assured there's a certain amount of cushioning in some of the numbers in there. The second kind of risk, which actually needs quite different attention, is the reputational risk and the political risk and the standing with parents. And the parents and the children are the ones being affected by this. And I think we need to see how that risk is managed. In other words, how that relationship is rebuilt. And the third one is actually the statutory educational outcomes and services which have to be managed. And they need to be dealt with attention to the needs of the children and the plans that are in place and the facilities that deliver and the staffing and the facilities. So I think each of those, we need to see a separate risk management plan. They obviously do, as I said, they interact. And each of them, we need to know, how's it going? So what are the indicators? How is it being measured? How is it being reported? Who knows if we're on track? And if one's getting better financially, but the service is getting worse, what do we do about it? And we also know that the letter we got said the government could say, it's not being done right, we're pulling out. And at that point, suddenly anything that comes from the government stops, I presume. So that's a really big risk. And that's actually the governance risk. and the political one, which has been given to committees to inherit who haven't made that decision and might not even be here.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
I'd just like to see that set out as clearly as possible, because then people will understand what's happening to their lives, their children's services. And, I'm sure we all know parents of 5 years of sort of neglect of providing what is needed for their child to get the right education and support.
Thank you, Martin. Just one comment I was quickly going to make. My understanding, and Hannah, you may correct me on this, is I think you mentioned that 21.5 million was due to be paid over on the 31st of March. And I gather from what you said that has now been paid over. So that means our deficit, which was 56 million, is now 35 million?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and my other understanding is once that has been paid over, and this is the funding that's purely for writing down the deficit, we can't use it anything else as far as I understand it.
No, that's specifically for the deficit.
So we can't use it to invest in services, it's basically just to write down the deficit as part of the safety wealth.
That's what the agreement says, yes.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the other question from that is, because we know that our neighbouring authority in Baines are also in the safety valve, but are currently suspended. I think if that was to happen to us, can I just be clear that that will not allow the DFEs to reclaim back that 21.5 million, and that's now been handed over and done with?
So as far as we know, the amounts paid to date are not reclaimable.
Okay, and for future payments, they are?
Yeah, so you did ask me this before, but I hadn't had a chance to check, so I apologise. I think, can we clarify exactly the sort of position, particularly around, I just don't want us to sort of be very clear about that unless Guy's very sure. I think we should clarify, is that right? And we'll write to members with that information.
Okay, thank you, that would be very useful. So, next on my list is Councillor Rippington and then Councillor Stone.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm only going to make some points. I do agree with some of what's been said here already. I agree that we had briefings on Resources Committee. We weren't consultees, and I do think that ought to be made clear. I also agree that Bristol's been failing on this for a long time. 13 years ago, my son had to go out of county for a secondary placement because there were not enough special needs schools in Bristol. So this has been, a very long-term problem that we haven't addressed. I do think it says something about the political debate in our city that so many people were willing to disbelieve what our council officers said about the secrecy behind this scheme, and instead were willing to believe the word of the current Westminster government, which, to be honest, does not have a great reputation for telling the truth at the moment.
We never Tim, we're in scrutiny.
I think what nobody's asking really is why we're in this position. Essentially, the government's allowed this funding crisis to develop across the country. As Stephen has said, this isn't a Bristol-specific thing at all. And the safety valve is really an attempt by the government to do the absolute minimum possible to address the situation, as I can see it. So I'd urge everybody to read the LGA debate on SEND provision and funding, which took place in January 2024, which makes it quite clear that the 2014 Act, which we talked about earlier, was the right thing to do, placing children and young people at the heart of the SEND system, but the funding didn't come along with it, and a lot of people said that at the time, that if this isn't funded properly, we'll be in a lot of trouble, and lo and behold, here we are now. So that's what I'm going to say on that. But I do have my question about the capital funding that we're still waiting for. I just wanted to clarify we're still waiting to hear whether we get that. That's 28 million, is it? And if we don't get that, that is going to have a massive impact on our ability to deliver this. So it's in the government's own interest to give us that money in order to enable us to deliver their plan, because it's our plan which they want us to deliver, essentially. But do we have a sense of whether we're actually going to get what we've asked for, or have other councils asked for similar amounts and got 2/3 or whatever?
We haven't been given any steer on how likely we are to receive all of it or some of it, and what some of it might look like if we don't receive all of it. I think what we need to do is, if we do only receive a smaller amount than the 28 million we've looked at, is work with our key partners to address how the money we do receive can give us the best impact in terms of placing as many children in specialist provision as quickly as possible as we can do, really. So until we know exactly how much we're going to receive, we won't be able to put that mitigation in place.
And is there any likelihood that we may be coming back to Strategy and Resources Committee in the future to ask for more capital funding from our own budget in order to make up that shortfall and make this work?
I mean, I think we need to cross that bridge when we come to it, if I'm honest. So, I mean, it's worth saying that the DfE advisors that we've been working closely with around the whole deal are aware of the amount of capital that we have got built into the deal. They know how much and they know why, and as you say, it's completely contingent on that capital funding arriving. Otherwise, we are in a different place, as the report said. So we're anticipating. We've been anticipating it for a little while, to be honest. But I don't have any sense that that's either not going to arrive or that it's going to arrive in part. We just don't know. And we're pressing for it all the time. We just don't know.
Councillor Stone.
Thanks very much. Actually, I'm going to continue from where Councillor Robertson just left off, to be honest with you. There is one easy solution for this, and that is the deficit to be completely wiped off. Because it could be, because it is an underfunding over the last, God knows how many years of our children in Bristol. And this is why I'm really confused that we constantly talk about how much money we're going to save when we should actually talk about how many people we can actually support, or young people and children that we can support. But my question really is that I do want to be assured by the council that we will continue to be fully compliant with our legal obligations to provide that support whilst complying with the safety valve under the 2014 Act of the SEND law. So I just want to hear that again, that those assurances, please.
So for sure. I mean, part of the role of Emma's service is to meet the statutory responsibilities that rest upon us in terms of meeting the needs of all children all children across Bristol, but particularly all children with special educational needs under a statutory assessment process. So yes, I don't know if you want to say anything.
No. I mean, you've got. We will meet statutory requirements. I mean, it's really, really vital that we do, and we know that hasn't always been done in the best way possible up to now. But that doesn't mean that isn't something that we will strive to make sure that we are doing, and making sure that families, children, and all the rest of the city know that we put the children and young people at the heart of what we're doing. And we do appreciate that sometimes that has been quite difficult in the past, but we are working on those relationships, and we are working with stakeholders, and we're really committed to making sure that this works for all of the children and young people in Bristol.
Yes, so I'd like to just continue by saying that I want to remind people that there has been a steady rise in appeals in the SEND tribunals, where we have seen an overwhelming number of those appeals actually being upheld, meaning that there is evidence of unlawful decision making. And I want to just make sure this is on the record, because again, we need to be assured that the local authority will prioritise compliance with the SEND law, because as I've just suggested, there's evidence to suggest that we don't.
I think so we are, as you know, in common with many local authorities. That doesn't excuse it. We are certainly looking particularly around our timeliness statistics to improve them, and as you know, they have improved. They're still nowhere near good enough. No one's arguing they are, and that's our big priority. Part of the challenge in the service at the moment is how do we focus, as we have been doing it certainly over the last number of months, and increasing our timeliness, whilst recognising the scale of the number of children and young people who are waiting for us to make the statutory assessment. So I'm not denying any of that. That continues to be a priority for us.
Thank you. I've got one more question. Sorry. It is on a completely different scenario though, so thanks very much for that, Hannah, and Emma, thank you for your answers. So I wanted to ask about the safety valve, all the shenanigans around the safety valve. So my question is that the safety valve finances had been indicated in February's budget 2023, so we knew it was going to happen, basically. I just want somebody to tell us, given that the safety valve is a financial contract, what bit was so central, or what bit was so, so urgent, that you needed to use an APR 16 piece of legislation to get the paper to Cabinet, to the meeting in March, to the March Cabinet meeting to be signed off. What I'm trying to say is, why was it so urgent? Why couldn't we just, pushed it, have the consultation, have the conversation, have the transparency? Why did it have to go down that route?
So I think there's two things particularly. So one thing is, it is the case that we were asked, as were other authorities, I don't think there's any dispute about this, to not announce the safety valve until it was announced. And so if you look at Devon, if you look at Bracknell Forest, if you look at Wiltshire, those are local authorities who all went to the safety valve at the same time as us, all took their papers under an exempt and restricted ruling around the safety valve. To Devon at the same time as us, Wiltshire and Bracknell Forest a couple of months earlier. So there was a question around the restricted marking on making a safety valve announcement, particularly around the detail of the agreement before it was announced by the DfE. So that was a suggestion. I think the particular question to Bristol was that the timing of the decision making was hitting up against the pre-election period. So what we wanted to do was to obviously make the proposal through Cabinet ahead of the pre-election period, which is where we needed to make sure that we did that very quickly in order to be able to come out before the pre-election period closed that period and do that properly. I don't know if there's anything Stephen you wanted to add to that.
Can I come back on that then? Yeah, because that does, why not just wait till after the election period? As what has been suggested here today, I think Councillor Bells has just said, some of us won't be here. So why not? Why make it so urgent? Why just wait after the election period, have a little bit more consultation, have a little bit more conversation behind the scenes, and then people who are elected in the election period can make the decision.
So there's a really simple question, answer to that, which is that it does relate to this financial year. So what we wanted to do was obviously we wanted to start the financial year, as many have set out, in a way that we're able to deliver start to deliver immediately against the aspirations in the plan. So that's why we couldn't leave it into the financial year, because all of the agreements have been made ahead of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course it makes sense, but again, come back to it as a financial, it always comes back to the finances, and it's like budget people and accountants pushing buttons around. At the end of the day, this was an important decision that the councillors needed to enact upon. It's about the welfare of young people, not about the financial decisions and about money and numbers. I don't trust that answer, to be honest with you. I think it was ridiculous.
I think you will just need to remember that the decision is a political decision. We have a legal duty to meet a balanced budget. The first item on our auditor's report about the risk this council faced last year was the risk of us being insolvent because of the DSG deficit. We've got a duty, we've got multiple duties, and they sometimes conflict. That's why we have elected politicians to make the decisions. So the decision was made by this administration. We were in a batch of authorities who were working to the start of this financial year. If we'd missed it, it could have potentially been a long time until we got the next chance. I don't know what the batches are, whether it be a whole year, but each year that we miss is a year that we can't take the opportunity to avail ourselves of, in this instance, £53 million. Now, it is still absolutely all to play for. A new administration, if you are in charge, you can decide to step away from the safety valve. You can decide, literally, to talk to DfE about a different arrangement. I think what we said is this bus was leaving the station. Did we want to be on it or not? Yeah? We're not there until the end destination if you don't want to be. That's a political decision you can make. And by the way, it is about money, I'm afraid, because the only way that children and families get help is if someone pays the salaries of people who help them. Without money, we don't have the ability to even be in the conversation. So I would go back to say, it's a political decision. It could be reversed in May if the new administration wants to go a different path. Or they could even talk to the DfE about buying themselves some time if they wanted to. But the plan, as Guy has said, will be something you as leaders and your successors will be able to remake, rework with officers. It's a living thing. And as long as we keep in a dialogue with DfE, they will, I'm sure, go with that. Because what they want is something which is politically supported as well as being supported in our city by our stakeholders. It's what we all want. We're now, at least we're starting the journey together, and I think we need to just carry on in that spirit.
Thank you.
Councillor Townsend.
So there's a number of things that are in this safety valve that if you don't get them delivered on time, then the contract you're way out with the contract. I'm particularly interested in the free school. September 2026, that's like tomorrow. And the temporary secondary that was supposed to be open in 2017 is still in terrapins in my ward in 2024. So that gives you lot an indication of how long it takes Bristol, working with the DfE, to open a new school. So what happens in September 2026 if the places aren't there? That's my first question. I do want to see what the DfE said about the way in which this administration and the senior officers chose to keep this safety valve and chose to handle it. We need to see that, because only that is going to give us a baseline for the confidence that you're saying you want to rebuild back with our parents, the carer community, with our SEND parents, because without our SEND families, this is going nowhere. And if they wanted to, they are very able to organise themselves, and they will hold this back. And we need to draw a line under this, and we need to see it. The parents need to see it, and we as politicians need to see it. And in May, whoever comes on board will need to see that communication. Because unless and until we see it, people aren't going to believe you. It's as simple as that. That's the bottom line. The idea that we might have to pay some of the millions back, that really concerns me. Because on the one hand, you're saying you can come out of this contract. You can come out of this contract, but if it means paying the 21 million that they've already given us, right, at the end of last month, that's really problematic. And actually, that might mean we don't come out of the contract because it's too much, right? So the idea that politicians come May the 2nd are in a position where they can or can't enter this is still in the air, from what I've heard, both from yourself and from others. That's a point, really, that I want to make. The 28 million, or just over the capital tomorrow, when will you know if that is actually coming in as part of the safety valve? What is the timeline for that? And if the day after that we pull the contract, or the politicians that are in place pull the contract, what happens to it? Do we need to get the 28 million in our accounts and bricks and mortar on the ground in reality before we think about possibly what's going to be happening next, and make sure that the 20 odd million that we've already got, that ain't coming back, because nothing in the contract allows that to happen? It's the first 2 years is when we're getting most of the money, and that's when most of the work is happening within this. And really, we really need to understand what are the strings that are attached to that. What is it that we've been signed up for? Where are the KPIs? Where is the contract? How is it that the politicians that have signed this have made the decision? Because the papers that are in the public domain don't give us any indication as to where these risks are, what it is that they've signed us up for. And I think that there's numerous people here that would agree with me. And we need to see it, it's as simple as that. And unless and until we see these things, we can sit here and talk about how we want to do co-production all we like, but we're not going to be doing it in the way that we need to, because we need transparency and we need open, and we need to be open, and we need everybody to understand exactly what is going on, Because what we don't want is 6 months down the line to go, oh, you can't do that because of X, Y, and Z. Yeah, exactly. And the only way we're going to do that is to see exactly what it is that this current Labour administration has signed this council up for. Thanks.
So, thank you very much. I mean, I think that I think the first thing to say is, I think we all need to understand where the safety valve is effective and where it's problematic, and particularly we've got. There's as I said, there's 38 local authorities in the safety valve. 34 of them have been in the safety valve for some time. Yes, 5 of them have had their payments suspended, but there are 14 local authorities who are published as having used this process to be able to demonstrate improved outcomes for children and young people and managing the evidence. So we do. I think the issue, as always the case, isn't it, that the local authorities that have really struggled with this process are the ones that are the noisiest. There are local authorities nationally who share very similar demographics to us, who have done very well in terms of improving outcomes for young people and managing their deficit. And we just need to understand that as well as the authorities that have really struggled with it, so that we can make a balanced decision, and so that politicians in due course can make a balanced decision. So I suppose that's where I'd start. Just on the sort of see it to believe it, I just wanted to sort of say, from a sort of official's perspective and from the sort of DCS role, we really want to see this to believe it too. We really need to be able to deliver this improved outcomes for children and young people with SEN as a SEND programme as opposed to as a financial programme. That's what we want to do. And I suppose I just wanted to echo that and welcome the challenge, welcome the accountability from an official's perspective, as and when there's a new council. I think just on places, just to say the obvious, I think that I was part of the DFE until I joined this team, and you know that I was also responsible for the delivery of free schools across the southwest, and there is certainly a question about free schools nationally and in the southwest about how can we deliver free schools on time. So I suppose I don't exempt Bristol from the delays of the free schools that we've had here, but it's not just Bristol where there are delays in the procurement and the delivery of free schools, and we've all got lessons to learn about how do we build free schools on time, because certainly if you look across the southwest, particularly specialist free schools, there are a lot of delays, and so we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to get that free school up on time. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm saying it's not necessarily a Bristol thing. I don't think. And then I think on the sort of when will you know in terms of capital, we were expecting to hear by the end of the financial year to the capital allocation. I have asked this week, when are we going to hear any more about the capital allocation for local authorities to the safety valve? And I was told it's not bad news, it's not good news, it's just no news at the moment. So I don't know when we're going to know, and I wish I did, because I wish I'd be able to say we're going to know by the X day. We don't know. And we'll continue to press on that. I've already said I think it's a big risk. And obviously, but we have no reason to believe, I think, that we know, as the paper, the cabinet paper tomorrow sets out really clearly, the relationship between the safety valve deal as a whole and this capital funding. One is entirely dependent on the other, and if we don't, as your colleague was saying, if we don't have the capital funding, then we will need to be having further conversations for sure about how we deliver this deal. So I don't know what else I can say, other than we will continue to chase, and I'm sure Marvin will be speaking to the DFE tomorrow. We'll do the same, I'm sure.
You want me to follow up?
I mean, for me, the biggest, so what you're saying then, Hannah, is the biggest element that will enable this safety valve contract as it stands to be delivered on time and within the years are the free school and the capital, both of which basically the DFE are kind of like, we don't know. And we won't, I mean, getting the places in the authority is the biggest element of this, by far. We can digitalise everything we like, but if we ain't got the places, we're paying independent special, or we're buying in South Gloss or whatever. That's what we need to get. But those are not within the control of...
Yeah, so I'll just come in terms of we've broken our capital kind of programme down into a number of schemes. So scheme A1, which is the kind of top one, which is around specialist provision, that's the funding we've received in the last financial year before, and in the coming financial, well, in this financial year, 1.2 million we've received. So that funding is already secured. We're building those places as part of our Send Wave 2 programme. Those places will come online, and that's where the majority of our savings will come from in terms of bringing those places online. The additional funding that we've applied for, if we don't receive that, the actual funding savings profile for that is much lower than our existing provision that we're building. Obviously, the free school, there is a risk in that in the September 2026, but the school will open in terms of with lower numbers and build up over time, so it's not going to hit us straight away in that 2026 if there is a delay, and there are discussions ongoing about whether we can take that build in-house as a local authority and self-manage that build, like we did with the Trinity School up in Lockleys. So
can I come back on that, Chair? What I don't understand is, I see that it's 30 odd places that you're looking to get open September 2026. Where do you know where that site is? Have you got the site, you've got the money, and you've got the multi-academy trust? Where are you with planning? Though, I mean, these are the kind of on-the-ground stuff. There's a long timeline coming in, and 2 years is not long, as we know.
Yeah. So we can get you that information. Obviously, I don't have that information to hand. It sits with our capital team, but we have a site identified. We have the I think they've announced now who the trust will be leading on that. It's just in terms of having that agreement from the DFE of a start date in terms of building, or whether we take that decision in-house to take that forward as a build from the local authority rather than relying on the DFE to deliver that.
Okay, Councillor Classic, and then Councillor Wilcox.
I should have put my hand up slightly earlier because I think most of the questions I was going to ask and points I was going to make have been covered by a lot of my colleagues. So I just want to make, I guess, similar to what everyone else has said. The process has been really disappointing. I don't think that we've had real proper scrutiny. Disappointed that the cabinet members are here, and as has been pointed out, it was a political decision, and yet we don't have anyone who made that political decision in the room with us to speak to us, to answer our questions. And ultimately, the people that are going to be responsible for the implications of this decision potentially are the people sitting on these benches in the committee system, the people that are on the committees that are responsible for this. So it is really disappointing. And I really don't think the process and the kind of lack of scrutiny has helped what is clearly a historically very fractured relationship, not only between kind of opposition benches and the administration and officers, but also parents and those with children with SEND and EHCPs. It has not helped any of this. So yeah, I'm still not entirely confident that this is, even after all these discussions, there's still, as you know, I know your point about other councils who have signed up for it and then there have been problems, that obviously I fully understand that local news is only going to print the headlines about where there's issues, and nobody wants to read a headline saying safety valve a complete success. I obviously understand that, but I really don't think that I'm convinced that or confident that this was, that we can have confidence in this decision still, and I don't think it's really helped. Sorry.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to drill down more into this issue of the new SEND school. I have had a look on the planning website. There's no planning application in for the Elmfield school site. Trinity Academy is in my ward. I know how long it took to build that school, and I know how important the number of places that we have for SEND students is critically important to how we deliver the safety valve. A 2-year time frame is not really realistic for delivering that school. What is your backup plan, please?
So obviously, very tight timescale. We know that's probably one of our biggest risks in terms of delivering school places, specialist places. There are opportunities to open in terms of temporary accommodation for that smaller number of students on that site going forward. But until we have a decision from the Department for Education whether we're able to take that build on ourselves, we can't progress those plans.
I mean, and it's worth saying it is quite normal to be able to open in temporary accommodation if we haven't got. I'm not saying there's plenty of options around temporary accommodation, but we do. You know, the department does do that, and has done that, particularly around specialist provision, which, as you say, we need in the right time. So, I don't know, but I think that is where we would go if we're not able to open on the site that we have in time, and that is the normal process.
Okay, thank you, David. Councillor Bales.
I think it was Lisa that mentioned the rise in numbers of tribunals between parents and the council. We know how much that costs us as parents with time and money, taking time off work and all the additional costs when you have to go for ETIOS and all the other things that you have to go through. But I don't think we've ever had an amount of how much it costs the council in legal fees. And obviously we want the safety valve to work, but I think parents are also concerned that that also means cuts. So cuts to services means that, or it could mean that tribunal amounts go up. So if this is going to work and it's going to make officers make better decisions and tribunals are, well, hopefully go down to nothing, has that saving been factored into this? Because it says savings forecast, but that could mean absolutely anything. So could we have an amount that tribunals cost in legal fees and whatever additional costs, and can we have a forecast on that?
I'm happy to try and get that information and write it and send it to the members, or to the councillors.
Okay, do we have any more questions? Councillor Gollop. Before I go to Councillor Gollop, I'm just going to jump in with a couple of observations of myself. I think this process has been very daunting, and there are things that have been said that have happened that perhaps I'm not entirely happy with. But what I think I do want to clarify is that it is a shame that there are none of the key politicians involved in making this decision here, that instead they've basically left it to officers to answer questions that would easily be answered by politicians. I do think we need to get clarity on, as you said you're going to, about whether any funding once it's handed over to us, or, sorry, let me rephrase that, any of the deficit write-down that is allowed, it's staying with us and is not returnable. I am concerned that even within the deficit management programme that some of the numbers are referred to as stretch targets, because if it's a stretch target, then that to me tends to indicate that we will make those numbers if the wind is blowing in the right direction and everything goes for us. But I do take on board what was said earlier about, I think this programme will change very quickly, because I understand the reason behind going into the safety valve. I am, however, also concerned that the safety valve, that a key part of that is it allows us to transfer money from the general fund, and I'm conscious that the general fund is not exactly in the most robust state it could be, and we don't know what future decisions have been made by future governments about the funding of local government. It may be better, it may be worse, but we know we are also facing increased demands. And I think we're all conscious of the fact that adult social care has taken up 70% of our dispose of a budget, and that will also squeeze upon our council budgets. And I think, and I am going to say this, and I would say it if the Cabinet members were here as well, I think there was a major error made in the way that this entire discussion with the DFE has taken place. We're all acutely conscious of the fact that in a few weeks' time we have an election, and then we move to an entirely different governance system, and we're conscious of the fact that key players have already indicated they will no longer be part of this council. And I think it was a severe miscalculation not to at the very least involve party group leaders from all the parties to have regular briefings on these discussions, given that they are going to have an impact, as Councillor Barrows pointed out, not just on the entirety of the next term of office for those of us who may get re-elected, but also beyond. But that is not a comment I expect officers to respond to, but it is a comment I think needs to be addressed by those of us, or those who are making political decisions. I am going to close off the meeting now, with the exception of Councillor Gollop, Councillor Stone and Councillor Townsend, who caught my eye just before I finished the meeting.
Thank you, Tony. First comment, well, I agree with everything you said, but I think particularly just to emphasise the absence of politicians has put the officers in a very difficult position. I congratulate you on the professional way in which you've responded and dealt with the questions we've thrown at us, so thank you. Having said that, I'm going to throw a couple more at you. I've talked about finance in my first comments, but actually the finance in a way is incidental to all this. Can you give us a categoric assurance in your professional opinion, Hannah, that this proposal will result in better provision for the children who need it?
It's a bit, can I say, I can't give you a categorical, I can say we will do everything we can to enable that to happen, working with partners across Bristol. That's what we do, that's what we're here to do.
That's a very valid response, but it was worth trying on my part. Second question, which we made much harder for you to comment on. I have struggled to understand a lot of things the current administration has done. But the one I understand least of all is the contempt they've shown for the parents of special needs children. Is it possible that on the 2nd of May you and your team can draw a line under what has gone before? Because whatever we do in this is not going to work if the parents are not on side and recognising that we're working with them. And that redrawing and reworking of that relationship is going to be fundamental. Is it possible that that could be done under whoever is responsible under the new administration?
I mean, again, just to say, and as I said at the beginning, as you know, it has been the priority of the team for many months to improve our relationship with parents and carers, and we thought we were making some progress, and we will continue to make progress and to dedicate ourselves to that conversation. And we want, and that's what we want. Again, that's what we want to do because we cannot do it on our own. And we look forward to doing it.
Councillor Stone.
Yes, I would just like to say it has been a political decision. It's been a political decision over many years of underfunding SEND provisions and differences by the government. However, I am really quite nervous about what I'm hearing here. So you've said categorically, and I'm just repeating what Councillor Townsend has said, that we were meant to be building, I'm from a construction background, we're building a school in 2 years, and that we don't have any assurances of the capital, £28 million capital. So my question is, what would happen if we chose not to enter this safety valve?
I mean, in a sense, so we have entered the safety valve. I think it's the first answer to the question. As Stephen said, it will be a decision for a new administration what we do next. And also the strings, take the question about the amount of funding that have arrived and all of that. So we need to explore that. I think I just wanted to go back to the sort of what were the options, what are the options in front of a council with £56 million worth of deficit funding in the high needs block with 1,100 an increase of 2,189 EHCP plans. How do we make sure that we both improve outcomes for those children and we manage the budget which allows us to be sustainably functioning as a council going forward? That was a decision that was taken by the politician.
And to put it another way, I think what we want to get to is a place where the programme that we are looking to deliver is the programme that you and parents and carers would wish us to deliver anyway. We think that the makings of that programme is in what you've seen. You have not seen as much detail as you'd like. Absolutely, we will give you that. But the answer to the question probably is we'd like to look at a similar programme, but we wouldn't have the benefit of £53 million government money to bail out the revenue side and about 28 million, whatever it is, on the capital. So we would have to then find that money from other budgets. So I guess, I'm looking at this and saying glass half full, but with eyes wide open, and saying, we'll take the money, thank you very much. Now let's get on and deliver the transformation that we all want to deliver to make life better for the young people we're here to serve. That's basically what I would say. Let's get over this. Let's get into a programme that we all believe in, and there'll be risk in it. But if we set the bar too low, then we won't have that stretch ambition. So all of the things you said are absolutely right, but this, I think, needs to become our shared programme, Bristol's shared programme, to deliver what we're all here to do.
Christine, you have the last comment.
And it follows on nicely from what you were saying, Stephen. This is about, there are some schools in this city that don't play with inclusion. Simple as that. They never, most of them never have. For various reasons, they're selective in whatever way they want to be, variously selective. So, does the safety, I think I know the answer, does the safety valve give the local authority any more mechanisms to basically bring those schools into line? I think the answer to that is no. So then the question becomes, how is it that you're going to make sure that every school in this city plays its part? Because it isn't at the moment, and some of about a third of the secondary schools never have. So we're talking about culture, we're talking about approach to education, we're talking about who the people that run those schools think that they should be educating and which schools down the road should be educating which types of kids. It's a massive problem, and it has been since I was a kid going to school in the city. And unless that changes, we can put all the plans in we like. We're still going to have some bits of the system really playing its part and overplaying, and then being, coming out with high permanent exclusion figures because they're so inclusive and the needs are so high, and then we'll have another school across the other side of town that actually, when you look at their statistics, they're not playing their part, but they've got really small numbers of permanently excluded children, so actually they're all right. So it's about how do we make sure that the entirety of the system plays its part in this? What are the levers that we're going to use to do that?
That's a big final question. And I'd really love to talk more about the challenge. So, and part of the reason why, if I'm honest, I took this job was because of the need to work with schools and the local authority to build a system which serves all children, and that is what we're trying to do. It doesn't give us any more mechanisms, as you know. We've had this year, we've had 77 permanent exclusions so far. We had 83 this last year, permanent exclusions across Bristol. So we have way too high levels of exclusion across Bristol, as you know. And I met with the secondary heads last week to have that discussion, and we'll continue to have that discussion. But I totally agree. It's a
Which heads weren't there?
There were lots that were.
No, but it's always the ones that aren't. Those are it's the ones that don't turn up. And they're the ones that aren't playing their part largely, unless there's a reason why they want to turn up, because in their particular cohort, they've got a high number of that particular type of child that you're talking about on that day. So they're interested in that, but they're not interested in the rest of it.
So I was just going to add, totally sort of get where you're coming from. I've been in the role 3 weeks, so I'm still sort of coming to grips with the sort of hugeness of the role. But I think the thing that we really need to be thinking about is how can we use carrot as well as stick to get those schools in? Because, well, the thing is that actually, no, but what I mean is if we haven't got mechanisms that we can use, but if what we are giving schools in terms of support to help their inclusion becomes such a non-negotiable that they want to be part of that, and what we can offer to help support therefore the children's families who are at the heart of what we're doing, that is, I'm hoping, a way that we will get in. But it is about making those contacts. I'm trying to be really visible. I'm trying to get around all the schools, particularly those ones that maybe are not so quick to engage. I'm trying to make sure that I get out there and have those conversations in order to build those relationships, because I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to get everybody on board to become more inclusive in what they're doing. But it is, you know, like you say, it's a really big challenge, but I'm happy to have follow-up conversations if, you know, if you have ideas about that as well.
The carrots are the only thing this local authority's been using for over 10 years. I just want to put that in there.
Okay, and on that note, with carrots, I'm going to call the meeting to a close. What we are going to do is we are going to put together very quickly a refer to go to Cabinet based on what has been said here tonight and the questions raised and comments made by members. Jeff, did you want to make a very quick comment?
It was only that I just wonder whether we need some discussion briefly on exactly how that wording is going to be. I don't want to prolong this, but we've had a really useful meeting, but we've had all sorts of different views expressed, and Lucy is a magician at pulling together reports, but I'm just wondering whether this isn't a challenge too far without us giving a little bit more steer.
I think my response to that is you're right, there's been some very varied and some quite in-depth statements and questions. In fairness to Lucy, what I think is we need to give Lucy the time to collate everything together, and then that's not going to happen immediately now. I think we're probably going to have to do this via correspondence, via email, for everybody who wants to contribute this to this, because I don't think we're going to be... Lucy needs to sleep as well, apparently, I'm told. I still need to see evidence of that, but apparently that's the case. So what I suggest is that we let Lucy collate everything together, we put together a refer, and then we get input from members who may want to emphasise certain things or suggest what particular areas the refer to Cabinet should focus on. I hope that's acceptable to everybody. Okay, well with that, I'm going to bring this meeting to a close, which is officially the last ever scrutiny meeting of Bristol City Council, at least for the next 10 years until there's another referendum. Oh, sorry, Councillor Smith, we'll remember one day. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for the members of the public for coming along and making statements and asking questions. Good luck to Hannah and her team. You have a massive, enormous job in front of you. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.